Thank you for auditing the always positive new music review show where a French professor is finally discussing the album God Save the Animals by Alex Giannascoli. Now, it's taken me a while to review this album, and this is part of what I'm doing in January. I'm trying to catch up on some albums that I missed last year. I only do 3 to 5 videos. I only review 3 to 5 albums a week, and a lot slipped through my fingers. My daughter happens to like this album quite a bit. Quite a few people asked me to review it, so here I am. Now, why did I not review this album by Alex Giannascoli before? Part of it is just my annoyance with his name. Alex G just sounds like some, like a bunch of frat boy friends, and be like, oh, is it Alex P, Alex G, or Big Alex? Just the name kind of bugged me. Beyond that, sort of on a spiritual level, I think the fact that a lot of people who have sort of long last names, which are indicators of, a country where an ancestor came from, whether it's, Greek or Italian, I like having the name out there. I think that we need to normalize it. The tyranny of people with names like mine, sort of waspy names that are easy to pronounce and easy to spell, we need to get rid of it. So I will refer to him exclusively as Alex Giannascoli for this review. It's a great name. I know 1,000 Alex G's, but I don't know any Alex Giannascolis. The other reason that I didn't review this album is I was annoyed by the cover. It's actually a good cover with multiple parrots. You'll sort of see my wife's increasingly aggressive bird of paradise behind me. That's a nice plant, give you that kind of parody feel. But Bill Callahan had just released an album, Reality Backwards, with a parrot on it. So it's kind of like, what's going on here? But really, it was just when I listened to the album, it just made me feel old. And when I say it makes me feel old, it's not like I can't hang with the young kids, right? I can hang with the young kids. That's part of this channel. How's it going, fellow young people? But there was something I felt like I didn't relate to it. I didn't connect with it. And it's an album that feels like it really connects with people. It seems like its strength is its emotional core, and I was missing the emotional core. Now, I'll have you know, I now get the emotional core, but I'm going to talk to you about the barrier to me as somebody who has listened a lot to musicians like Bill Callahan. Like when I was younger, Bill Callahan, when he was known as Smog, that was my emotional salve. That was what helped me get through my 20s, his kind of depressing, detached view of the world, his sensitivity, his processing of trauma. And what I've come to realize is that Alex G, not only did he take the album cover from Bill Callahan, but he's sort of taking the baton, that there's a kind of folky rock power. There's a power to folky rock that really can only exist by a musician who is that good at communicating their emotions with an acoustic guitar in their hand, going back to the 40s and 50s, And it's interesting to see that this most recent development of folk rock music is one that it took me a second to understand. So like any good academic, I'm not just going to try to explain it. I'm going to try to name it. So I have a genre, and you probably saw it in the thumbnail, that I'm going to try to get off the ground here. I think of this music as hyperfolk. Listen, if someone else has already named it that, sorry. If someone else has already released an article about this album using that term, I don't know. I don't do that much research. But let me explain to you the idea of hyperfolk. One second. Sorry, I don't edit my videos. But this time last year, I missed an album from 2021, which I reviewed, Porter Robinson's Nurture, which I think actually fits into the same general genre of hyperfolk. So what do I mean by hyperfolk? First of all, it has to fulfill that spiritual role that folk music plays, which is when the listener hears it, they feel an intimacy, they feel an emotional vulnerability, they feel a certain level of acoustic warmth. But the thing is, when I add the term hyper, I am implying a high level of computer involvement, okay? This is folk mediated through computer production. This album is filled, Alex Giannascoli's album, God Save the Animals, is filled with acoustic guitars and voice changers, like auto-tuners and weird sounds. It has a very electronic soul feeling. And I think that is very much part of this sort of hyper folk, where it does some of the things that hyper pop does. This weird distortion of vocals, sometimes even burying the vocals. But at the same time, it gives you that feeling. And I can tell from the comments that I've gotten, I can tell from the way my daughter talks about it, this music does that thing that folk rock can do, that Smog did for me. I would also say that this music is very pale. And I don't mean very white, although it is probably very white, but that's not really what I mean. What I mean is it's very internal. It's very much people who don't go out rock climbing, okay? These people are not climbing Half Dome on the weekend. You get the sense it's a very sort of interior feeling music. One of the most interesting aspects that I notice in Porter Robinson and this is a certain gender fluidity. And I don't mean that it's intentionally trying to be gender fluid in its expression. I actually don't know what Alex Giannascoli looks like. I've never seen a picture of him, so I don't know if he is like clean shaven and wears dresses, or I don't know if he has like a folk hipster beard. I'm guessing hipster beard, but what do I know? I think I heard he's from Philadelphia, so I've spent like a couple weeks in Philadelphia over the last couple years. Yeah, I've seen those people. But anyways, like there's a gender fluidity to the way the singing is done. And that has to deal with this reliance or this usage of auto-tune to create backup singers, which sometimes I think are actually females and sometimes are actually his voice to make sound female. This brings a certain vulnerability. This deflates some of the toxic masculinity that is inherent in a lot of folk rock, including Smog, which, I mean, he talks about his toxic masculinity, you know. This is very much a generational thing I'm trying to get at here. The Generation Xerness of Bill Callahan is what I could relate to, and the millennial or Zoomerness, you know, in my opinion, this sounds to me like a millennial who makes music for Zoomers, right? That's how it feels to me. That's how the music feels to me. So, in the way that is very different, where it has that extra level of vulnerability, that gender fluidity, and a positivity. But it's what I would call a sad optimism. Does that make sense? Like, Generation Xers in general, those who grew up in the 80s and the 90s, had a detachment and a sort of pessimism that really wasn't earned. It was just sort of a sort of bizarre detachment. Whereas here, I think there's like a real sense of spiritual optimism that comes from a place of sadness, that comes from a sort of internal place. Like, I get the sense that people who listen to this music, and tell me if I'm right, by the way, not only do I want you to smash the like bucket, not only do I want you to subscribe to my channel so I can make 50,000 subscribers by the next semester, so I can brag to my students and feel like a cool teacher guy, I also want you to leave comments, especially if you are an Alex Giannascoli fan. Because I get the sense that people who listen to this music are like him, and they have this feeling of sadness, which this album's very sad. It's dealing with addiction and loss and hopelessness. But there's this pervasive yearning for some spiritual connection, which leaves it to a state of optimism. Is that the feeling you get listening to this album, Giannascoli fan? Is that what you get? Because that's what I get. You know, the more I do this channel, the more my mindset, weirdly enough, my mindset is actually getting younger. I'm actually thinking more like young people. Maybe that's because, you know, I have teenage kids and I listen to them and I take their opinions seriously. Or maybe it's just all this exposure to all this millennial Zoomer music. Probably the biggest difference in terms of the idea of hyper folk versus standard folk rock is that it's very clearly made on a computer. Part of what made old folk rock interesting, you know, I mean, when I think about folk rock, when I'm thinking about like my the figures that I am picturing, because there's a lot of people who fit in that realm. I'm not thinking, I don't know, Simon and Garfunkel. I'm thinking the band, Bob Dylan when he's with the band. I'm thinking Neil Young. I'm thinking Bill Callahan, Smog, and I'm thinking Alex Giannascoli. And the thing is that it's not recorded acoustically. It doesn't feel that. Even though there's the acoustic guitar, there's these constant reminders of the way it's recorded, which has a modular quality. It has a layering quality, which betrays the fact it's not recorded on a dusty old 4-track like Smog might have done, or on a reel-to-reel like the band might have done down in the basement, but it has that sort of bedroom quality. And I would say a hallmark of all of this hyperfolk that I've heard, and please give me more examples too, because I know that I'm thinking of more examples than just this, but that's all I have right now. So tell me in the comments, who else would you agree would fit into this basic idea? Gosh, I guess maybe Lucy Dacus as well. I can't tell. Anyways, as a vague spirituality. Not a concrete spirituality, but a vague spirituality, a longing for meaning, which might be a generational thing. It might just be a generational thing because people who are spend as much time on the internet as people under the age of 35 have their entire lives. There is an emptiness to the internet that I think needs to be filled with some kind of spirituality. Now let's get specific on this album, God Save the Animals. Also, buy my merch. I didn't put any product in my hair, so it's going to get progressively droopier throughout the video. So have fun watching that. As I continue to wage war with this bird of paradise. It's okay. My wife loves plants. That's one of her hobbies. This channel is one of mine. So this album in specific has really good production. And I got a comment recently, and if it was you, tell me it was you, from someone. And I do read every comment, by the way. I read every comment actually more than once. I don't respond to all of them. My kids say it makes me look desperate, but I love reading comments. Someone asked me, what do you mean when you say good production? So I thought about that. I spent a lot of time this morning. We have like a little playpen for my infant daughter, who's like 4 months old, and I'm sitting there, I'm listening to this music, and I'm sort of talking to her and engaging with her, and like showing her a little book with a little snail on it and all that stuff. And listening to this music, I'm really trying to think, like, what is it that makes good production? I think it's when the feelings and the desired message of the songwriter are communicated to the ears and the heart of the listener. Okay, so when a songwriter writes a song, they usually have something in mind for what the emotion or the thoughts, the ideas they're trying to get across. And a good producer does that. And there's 1,000 different ways of doing it. Sometimes you can do it very minimally. I mean, my favorite produced album of last year was the Black Country New Road, and part of what Sergio Matesco figured out was just let these folks work and give them space and mic the room and let it have this kind of very kind of live feeling. It wasn't sort of micro-produced all the time. Different producers are able to do different things, and this album, with that hyperfolk feeling, this search for spirituality, this ambiguity towards technology, towards addiction, all these things, it comes through. In particular, what makes this album so well produced is the layering. You really have to listen to it like 4 or 5 times to get to understand all the layering, because you hear all these layerings of these animals. There's no animals on this album. Not a single animal is on this album. Instruments is what I meant to say. All of these layers are very subtle. And they need the computer to really be there, because you can tell the way it's produced is these people are sitting around in a room. I don't even know the name of the producer. Sorry. Tell me in the comments the name of the producer or producers. That they're just sort of like bringing in these elements, and they're recording it all, and they're choosing it, and they're putting in. They're putting these things in. Also, it's a pretty modular album as well. There's lots of different segments that sort of seem to come out of nowhere, which is, to do that well and not have the album feel choppy is a real achievement, and this album achieves that. Thematically, it's hard, because I listened to the album the first time without reading the lyrics, and I was like, I don't know, this album's like, gee, I hope I sort of like, God exists? I like God? Like, that was the take I got, because so many of the lyrics are hidden, are buried, they're unclear, but now having read the lyrics, it's actually a very deep album, and it's very meaningful. It's not so much about the emptiness of technology as it is about the emptiness of addiction. And again, my thoughts are going to be a little bit tainted by whoever it is that decided to say what the album means on Lyric Genius. Some of it's a little too much like, and then this psalm says this. I don't think it goes that deep. But in general, the idea that it's about someone who struggles with addiction, which I wouldn't know. This is the first time I've ever listened to Alex Giannascoli. This is the first album I've ever reviewed. My daughter tells me this is not his best album, so maybe I'll check out the other stuff. Tell me his best album in the comments if you wish. But the idea that he is looking for spirituality and recovering from addiction makes this almost like a AA album, Alcoholics Anonymous, or probably Narcotics Anonymous, based on the way he's singing here. That someone who sort of reached bottom and is trying to find some way out. It's not a Christian album, but if I was a preacher, I would be psyched. I'd be like, sweet, I'm going to play this play this for the youth group. This is totally youth group music, because I've gone to church a lot in my life. My father was a minister, although not while I was alive. So I'm very familiar with Christianity and the way that it's shared and proselytized. And it seems to me that this music will be a big hit amongst Christian rockers, but it's definitely not a Christian rock album. But it really is about replacing drugs with God, spirituality, with meaning. I would say that God, personally, I don't think God's necessary in this whole equation. I think you can call it God, but the real key is just to value your own humanity. That's, in my opinion, that's the trick to getting out of any spiritual hole. Is just figure out what makes you human and value that. Because when you end up doing drugs and all that stuff, you just end up becoming sort of a consumer. Like you're just trying to get away. Like what makes humans great is our mind. Which you can call the soul if you want, whatever, doesn't matter. But that's what makes humans great. That's our humanity, our mind and our ability to connect to other people. And, drugs get in the middle of that. So you can call it God if you want, but anyways. I said my dad was a preacher, not me. And, I got to say by the fifth time listening, I'm sitting there doing a little tummy time for my daughter. I just got into the spirituality of it. I realized what this album has. This is not a preachy album. And if you're going to be talking about God, every single track, you better not be preachy. And especially if you're a folk singer. Folk singers are sort of inherently messianic, right? That's just a thing that happens. He's not preachy. He has the charisma of somebody who is currently figuring it out. Not the pretentiousness of somebody who has it figured out. The charisma of someone who's currently figuring it out. Mixed in with that tension of somebody who might not have done it. If you told me Alex Giannascoli is at Betty Ford Clinic and he's been there for the past 2 months because he relapsed and was, snorting cocaine or whatever the hell he does, I would not be surprised at all. Nor would I be surprised to find that he's been sober for 3 years and he's married and has a baby and has found this connection with humans and with life and he's feeling great. That tension, that's beautiful. That's real. Anyways, it's great. So let me give you my stamp. My example song of the album is No Bitterness. You can click above the banana, above the banana, above the bananas to hear the song. If you are on my Instagram and on my TikTok, I recorded a cover of this song. Me, Professor Sky. Because I realized it was in my range, if you can call my caterwauling range. So feel free to check that out if you want. The reason that I learned how to play is because I was listening to it and I'm like, this is really simple. This has got to be just 2 chords. And it really is. It's not even just 2 chords. It's crazy because it's just his fingers are like this, And they just lifts up this finger. And that's the whole thing. And the way that he sings is fairly simple, and he repeats these lines over and over again. But this is where the hyperness of hyperfolk comes in handy, because it's so densely produced. There's these backwards noises. A great drummer comes in, playing a very high snare, almost like a shuffle on the snare the whole way through. And then these twisted auto-tune sounds in the back, which make this very human song with these lyrics. My teacher is a child with a big smile, no bitterness. Yeah, that you got it, buddy. Hey, Alex Giannascoli, you figured it out. I'm an old guy who lives a happy life, and I can tell you that's correct. That should be your teacher. Your teacher should be the big smile of a child. In my case, it's a big smile of a baby who is smiling, looking up. You know, that's it. That's it. It's funny because I just reviewed an album by LA underground rapper Open Mike Eagle, and he's going through his own life crisis, trying to find meaning in his life through a life of not succeeding as much as he'd like to as a musician and going through a divorce, and he describes his success as his son's belly laugh in the other room. What's the similarity between these two artists who might not ever meet? They understand that there is a beauty and a nowness of the happiness of a child, of an innocence. The previous song to this talks all about innocence, and this is about the value of innocence. And that this is his teacher, is a smile with no bitterness. And that's the thing which we should all be looking for, is a smile with no bitterness. So it's a simple line, and he says it over and over and over again, but the more he says it, the more it becomes almost like a mantra. My teacher is a child with a big smile, no bitterness, how, right? And that's the way it is, because he's trying to become present, because that's the thing, right? Because if you're not present, then you fall into self-loathing, or you start living your life in the conditional tense. Jesus Christ, I'm preachy today. Not Jesus Christ, any prophet. Anyways, the key is to live in the moment. And it's a cliche for a reason, and that's what he's working on here. But so much is going on musically. It's awesome. There's this like very moving piano playing these same very simple notes. Like there's just all these. There's this moment where he's using this auto-tuned weird curly Q sound of a my child in the background, just once. It's like my child. It's so weird. It's so beautiful and so weird. This kind of auto-tuned soul, these multiple voices. And then we get to the most hyper-pop part, hippopotamus, with this like punk bit, very Zoomer sounding, very now sounding. All that great drummer's gone. We have a drum machine in here and all these blown out sounds. And I give it one more try and I open my mind. And if I could, I really would. I want to see yourself. I want to cover my eyes. It's a lie. You never died. This idea of like eternity, big questions in my heart. After this weird little hyper pop interlude, it then comes back with these great acoustic drums, and just the production is just kind of flexing. It's just sort of flexing how good this backwards sound is mixed in here. There's almost like a jam with the drummer and this great guitar pattern, which I butchered just a second ago. It's not a very straightforward rhythm. Okay, now I'm trying to get into Girl from Ipanema. Dun, dun, dun. Oh my God. Toby! That's my dog Toby. God save the Toby. In the last video I said I didn't like him. A lot of people said you like him. I love Toby. He can make it tricky to have a sleeping baby and a YouTube career. So I'm going to go through the rest of the album a lot quicker. I'm going to start off with the track After All, the opening track. Kind of sweet guitar in unison, this odd altered voice. You know, this is why I didn't review the albums, because I listened to this first song and I was like, I can't do this, man. All this millennial Zoomer BS, but it's great. It's pitched, it's catchy. Some, like, maybe even echoes of the Sweater song by Weezer. Interesting lyrics. People come and people go away. Yeah, but God with me, he stayed. I really don't think this album is actually about Jesus with a J or God with a big G, you know? I guess I shouldn't shorten that. God with a big God. But it's, you know, it really is about the idea of spirituality. And I get the sense that maybe even he's feeling that he like wishes he could believe in these things that he's singing. I don't get the sense that he does. He just sounds like he's a very hurt, lost addict who's trying to get out of this hole, which is terrible. I mean, no, it's good. It's good because he's trying to get out, but it's terrible because as a human, I feel bad for his pain. And then I think at the end there's an actual woman, not an auto-tuned voice, but I can't tell. The next song is called Runner, which starts off with two, they have to be Stratocasters. I mean, it just sounds like a Stratocaster guitar. That's why I had that next to me there. But this song, what? Hey, I was alive during the 90s, okay? So listen, Giannascoli, I won't tell anybody, okay? But the thing is, the song that you copied is really popular. I hated this song. There was a song in the 90s called Runaway Train by a band called Soul Asylum. And this song is like Miller Lite wanted to have that song, but they couldn't afford the rights, so they paid some professional songwriter to do a sound-alike song. To even the point where runaway train never come back. And then this song's like, my runner, the same voice, a similar melody, a similar emotional register. Now don't worry, it gets better. There's this like cool freak out part and this instrumental breakdown. But the beginning part of this is so similar to Runaway Train by Soul Asylum, which now that I think about it is actually a pretty good song. I just hated it because it was always on MTV. It was a weird time. 90s was weird. Sometimes you had these weird like rock hits like out of nowhere. Anyways. So if you like this song and you've never heard the song Runaway Train by Soul Asylum, you're going to be like, ooh, wow, Professor Sky nailed it. But then this has a great freak out part, a beautiful freak out part, great youthful distortion. I've done a couple of bad things. Again, the sort of addict's remorse, nice instrumental breakdown. Next song is called Mission. The voice leads here, which is nice, very clear vocals. I got the sense that the rest, I was like, are the vocals going to be hidden for the entire album? Are they eventually going to be more forward? And here they are. This feels a lot like The Band. In particular, the end of the chorus, which I guess is sung by his girlfriend or his wife. I don't know, girlfriend. Molly Germer, who performs with Japanese Breakfast, which means I saw her perform in Rochester, which now makes me understand that they're all this like Philadelphia scene. And as a Bostonian, I'm annoyed because I want a Boston scene to be as good as this. But maybe there is. I just don't know about it. But it really reminds me a lot of the band's most famous song, The Wait, at the end of this singing where there's this little dun, dun, and like you just get ready. That sort of sense of resolution and excitement. I really like the voice is way in the front on the first verse, like almost a whisper. And then the third verse, it's just a room mic. So there's a very different sound. It reminds me a lot of that Dijon album from last year. Was that last year? Oh my God. No, that was 2021. Okay. I was like, because I would have made it on all my year-end reviews. Just the ability to record someone who can really sing, really project with a microphone far away gives a certain strength to it. Maybe he's actually inspired. Maybe she told him to do it because she watched Jabrecki do that thing where she sings and she holds the microphone really far and gets it close. I don't know. I feel, to me, this song is about the expectations of masculinity. I did good. I stayed out of the heat. I did good. I kept it on track. I was trained to stick to the mission. I don't know. I was trained to keep it on track. Catchy. Wow, this is really catchy. So whenever I do these reviews, and I don't edit. I don't really listen. So at this point, it's been like 2 hours since I've heard this song, and I've talked about 5 other songs since then. So the fact that I can lock right in, I was trained to keep it on track, that's very good. It's a good sign. So many different parts, piano, guitar, really well made. Then we get to the song SDOS, which stands for Standard Delivery On Site. I don't know what it stands for. And this was a necessary left turn because it's weird. A gorgeous lead into the song. If you think you know this album and you think you love it, have you actually really listened to how these instruments lead in? When I talk about how well produced this album is, how well these instruments lead in, this kind of guitar, piano, and then that percussion thing that usually looks like a fish. It goes, that thing, it just all goes in. This voice is super pitched down. The production's really amazing. Layers and layers and layers. Naked in my innocence, tangled in my innocence, 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 innocence. Again, this is right before No Bitterness, so the innocence is tied into the child. He's trying to find his innocence, the innocence that comes without being an addict or being on drugs. Beautiful piano bit. The beat comes back almost crossed, and then there's like a weird fake hip-hop part. God is my designer. Jesus is my lawyer. But I think this is interesting because then the next song starts off with my teacher is a child. So I think if we take these things all together, we understand that when he's talking about God, he's talking about animals. So what I think he's actually talking about is more of a snobby here, a Rousseauian concept of going back to a state of nature, like before the corruption, right? Because Jean-Jacques Rousseau, 18th century French philosopher, I wasn't planning on talking about this, so I'm talking off the top of my ass here. Anyways, he was basically I don't know if he's the first guy, but he's the most popular guy to really put forth the idea that human beings are born good and that we're corrupted by society, we're corrupted by money, we're corrupted by the need to work, we're corrupted by property, all these things, that we should just live in a state of nature. And it feels to me that this innocence that he's looking for, this God that he's looking for, these animals that he's looking for, is looking for that kind of state of nature, that state of innocence. On cue. Hey, Toby, I'm about to talk about the next song. Are they delivering the wok? I ordered my wife a wok from the wok shop in Chinatown in San Francisco. And it's the best place in the world to buy a wok, but their shipping is like terrible. So maybe that's coming. So the next song is No Bitterness, which I discussed to some degree. The next song is called Ain't It Easy? Not to be confused with the Guns N' Roses song, It's So Easy. Man. Guns N' Roses were really bad sometimes. It's weird because it starts off with kind of like a yeah, a weird sound, double voice, like kind of a Pavement style guitar line. It's a little too downbeat, this song. It's a little too downbeat. But what's interesting here, and again, this is the proposal from someone on Lyric Genius who said this is about a sober life with a partner. It could be that. These lyrics, season premiere, I have no more fear, no more judges, no more medicine. When I talk to you, I take you in. Again, this appears to be about trying to find presence. And so when you're married or when you're in a long-term relationship, there reaches a point where you spend more time in bed watching TV shows, streaming, than you do like other things. You know, physical intimacy is one of them, but also like going out, going walks on the beach, hiking, all the things you said you like to do on your dating app. And often there's like a feeling of loss. There's a feeling of like, I used to be young and cool, and we used to do it, 14 times a day, that kind of thing, But what I like about this is that it highlights the truth, which is that like, I'm currently making my way through the oddly overrated Homeland. Show's weird. Weird show. Why is everyone telling me it's so good? It's not overrated like The Wire, but it's weird. Anyways, there's some great things to it, but it doesn't matter. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the end of my day, and the baby's asleep, and the kids are back, and they're away, and we've had the whole day, and I had lesson planned, and I did this video, and I figured out whatever the hell Toby's barking at, and at the end I know I'm going to get to be there, and we're going to get to be together. Maybe I'll give her, maybe like a back rub, maybe just hanging around, and just being together. And even though it's the screen and it's the 21st century and can't we be present and remember when we used to just knit by the fire? Screw it. This is beautiful. This is a beautiful moment of domestic bliss. And even if that domestic bliss is mediated through technology, so be it. Another thing I want to say, streaming services fight addiction. Okay? I've known people who seriously have less of a drinking problem because of streaming services. It's cool. Because what is addiction? But like you're trying to just fill up your mind. You're trying to just kill your brain from going. You're trying to replace some of those sounds with something else. So what if you could watch every single season of Modern Family instead of drinking? It's great. So there's a sort of side thing here that I like about this a lot. Next song is called Cross the Sea. Another song that starts off with Yeah, Yeah, Yeah. And there's a lot of nice little connections between these songs, like the innocence and then my teacher and my designer and the other previous two songs. And then here we have these two songs which start off by Yeah, Yeah, Yeah. Again, another thing about what makes good production with an album, the sort of sequencing of songs, how to help it feel like an album and not a collection of songs. This very much has that. I'm going to guess that his primary influence on this song is Travis Scott. That's how it sounds to me with the production. Out of nowhere towards the end, there's this like loud metal noise, almost like this modular production. Again, it's kind of hip hop sounding, leading into the song Blessing. That blaring bit kind of continues here. But then it leads into the Billie Jean drum line. It's not exactly the Billie Jean drum line, but the thing about the Billie Jean drum line is that it's actually a very simple good drum line, right? It's not particularly funky. It's just the clarity of the line, like there's a confidence to the way that Quincy Jones produced that song. And so that's that sort of anchor of the drum beat comes in, and then instead of do, there's just simple bass and this kind of twirling guitar and kind of whispering. At a certain point, he says "huh," and I wonder if that's ironic. That "huh" bugs me, because the "huh" sounds almost like a "huh" of someone who doesn't think he should say "huh," but he's saying "huh" because it's funny. So if he's saying "huh" because it's funny, I'm pissed, because this album's earnest. Irony does not belong on this album. Sorry. But it could be an earnest expression, just like it came out of him. He had to say "huh." So tell me in the comments, is it an earnest "huh" or not? The blaring keyboard kind of comes back after it went away. There's a very Neil Young guitar solo. I'm going to be referencing Neil Young for the rest of the album. Basically, the back half of this album feels to me very inspired by Neil Young. I don't know if Alex Giannascoli listens to Neil Young, but he at least listens to people who listens to Neil Young. I can tell you that much. Epic kind of, they're probably like my favorite part of the album is this epic keyboard bit, this kind of lead keyboard, very simple and plodding. It's this outro. It's just great. Now the lyrics is "every day is a blessing," and again, this is very close to addiction, thematics. One day at a time is what they say in Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous. What does the N stand for in NA? Narcotics Anonymous, right? But like that's Narcoticsaholic Anonymous, whatever it is. Like that every day is, and again, it's this idea of being present, and that being present is living in the moment is the greatest way to fight misery. And in a similar way, gratitude is the key to fight misery, because all you need to be happy is gratitude. Now that's not easy, so I'm not saying like just be grateful, because some people don't, their synapses don't fire right. They can't access gratitude, so it's not always their fault. But if you are capable of being grateful for your situation as it is right now, if you have health, if you have physical health, you theoretically could be as happy as the happiest human being on earth, because you're able to sit there and know that every day is a blessing. Why am I turning into a preacher? The other month, maybe a couple months ago, I woke my wife up in the middle of the night by saying the following sentence: "I would rather eat one more bowl of cereal than be remembered for 1,000 generations." And then I went back to sleep. But I realized that I really meant it. That like so much of our life is thinking about the future and our heritage, especially if you're an artist or you're creative or you're an egomaniac. You think about how will you be remembered. But the truth of it is that it doesn't matter how you're remembered, because you're not going to be there. So your life only matters for the time that you're alive. Okay? So Shakespeare, right? Like if you could bring Shakespeare back, right? And say you can have one more meal with your family, and no one will ever have thought about you. He would take that in a second. Like the only thing that matters is life. That's it. That's the only thing that matters, is being alive. That's it. Because the rest of it's whatever. I mean, there's heaven or there isn't. There's hell or there isn't. We're never going to know. So that's what I meant. I would rather eat one more bowl of cereal than be remembered for 1,000 generations. So. Next song is called Early Morning Warning, The Rural Juror. I don't like this song. It's okay. It feels kind of fillery, nice kind of smoky clav sound going on here. It's gentle, it's well made, but in general, songs about like talking on the phone or waiting feel kind of fillery to me. Although this morning I did have to get my kids to the Model UN meeting, so I was waiting for them in the car to drop them off at 6:45 a.m. Terrible. Strings out of nowhere. Alex Giannascoli. Why are there strings on here? Is it that, like, this is sort of like that, huh? Like, you can't just have strings on one song, can you? I don't know. Immunity has kind of a banjo, a guitar, and auto-tune voices. Very interesting automated drum machine here. I thought it was an uplifting song. Just the music is uplifting, almost kind of video game-ish. But then I listened to the lyrics, cocaine in the vaccine, and Judy loves the fish scale. Fish scale is a term which I learned from Ghostface Killah. It's referring to cocaine. So it's actually a very sad song about hitting bottom and being addicted to cocaine, which is important to have songs about being addicted to cocaine. I remember, ever since The Hangover, the cultural attitude towards cocaine has been a lot more flippant. So I grew up in the 80s, in a time after a guy named Len Bias was going to be the next best basketball player for the Boston Celtics, the team that I rooted for because I'm from Boston. And I just grew up just being certain if I ever even looked at cocaine, I was going to die of an overdose like that. There used to be like a real fear of cocaine. And I'm really annoyed that it doesn't seem like that fear is as high. It appears as though it's regained its 70s status as like a fun party drug. But I've known like several people whose lives have been destroyed by cocaine. Fortunately, they rebuilt their life, But, and yeah. What is going on with me in the preachiness? Is it because it's the 12th day of Christmas? Headroom Piano is the next song. The real drums are back, kind of folky guitar and bass, kind of odd stilted sounds, very sort of 90s lead guitar notes. Basically an instrumental song. It almost sounds like it's being played over a public address system in a European train station. There's two guitars soloing and a piano. Then we get to the next song, Miracles. Here, Giannascoli's just got the acoustic guitar at the start. Sort of Jerry Garcia-like. The weirdness of the voices are basically out now for most of the end of the album. Just a very clear voice. These drums come in very, very sweet. Very, again, the band. Bob Dylan, Neil Young-like. His voice is... Giannascoli's voice is whiny and earnest. Again, very Neil Youngish. The clearest lyrics, probably my favorite lyrics on the entire album. You say one day we should have a baby. Well, right now, baby, I'm struggling. We'll see. Yeah. You say one day we should have a baby. Well, God help me. I love you. I agree. Yeah. It's like the fear, like this is that thing. This is the album has that feel, the charisma of somebody who's figuring it out, and the tension of maybe not figuring it out. Apparently, and this is according to Genius, that his girlfriend is pregnant, so the baby is maybe born, right? And so like that baby will hear this song at some point. Okay? Do you understand that? Do you understand that? That baby that is in utero right now, that's sitting there and kicking and drinking amniotic fluid or whatever the hell they do down there. I just had a baby. I should know this. That baby is eventually going to hear this song. And how they relate to this song is a big deal, right? Because here they're discussing the existence of your own existence. And you're hearing your father say, I'm struggling. I don't know if I can do it. Actually, I agree. So my hope, my prayer, screw it, I'm going to pray. Help me God, help me Allah, help me Jewish God. What's that? Help me God, help me Jesus, help me Jewish God from Talladega Nights. Like, I pray that baby grows up when it's 16 years old and hears this song and goes, wow, that's awesome. Dad really, really had to struggle hard and work it through. But of course it could go the other way. Alex Giannascoli could recidivate, could end up living a terrible life and end up just being a sort of wasteoid. Like it happens. It's terrible, but it's true. Addictions are lifelong diseases, are terminal diseases you give yourself, So that might happen too. So there's a real power to this verse. I'm so preachy today. The organ behind, very spiritual. Again, talking about, I got better pills than ecstasy, miracles, and crosses. This is like Ned Flanders rock right here. But I like it, though. I like it, but this is definitely the most, you want to talk about a song that's going to drive the evangelicals crazy. I don't know if we should have a baby. Actually, we should. don't even question having a baby. Also, hey kids, you think ecstasy feels good. Try this. Jesus? I'm tripping Jesus. You know, it's funny, but it's good. It talks about praying for the animals. There's a little problem I have. Every once in a while at my church, they would have like the Animal Day, the St. Francis Day, but we can't have it both ways, followers of the Old Testament. The Old Testament laid out why we're supposed to be crappy to animals. Let us make humankind in our image according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle, over all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. It's written in our religion that we're supposed to dominate animals. It's one of, arguably, the weaknesses of the Old Testament faith. Whatever. There's other weaknesses like fire and burning and killing people. But anyways, I'm just saying we're kind of picking and choosing if we're acting like our religions are really good to animals. Whatever. The final track is called Forgive. Forgive me for being so preachy in this video. Where Alex Giannascoli has another song with drums, guitar, very Neil Young, the most Neil Youngish on the entire album. Forgive yesterday, I choose today, no stories, no mirrors. I love this idea of no mirrors. Again, going into one of my favorite philosophers and thinkers, Blaise Pascal, who talks a lot about the inability to be alone in a room and the inability to stare at yourself in the mirror, because you look in the mirror and you see your flaws and you start thinking about the past, you start thinking about the future. You have to be present. If you're living in the present, you don't have any mirrors around. If you're trying to get better, you're not looking at mirrors. Just nice, very clear voice. Very reminds me of the song For the Turnstiles off of See the Sky by Train. Off of what's the name of that? Is it called See the Sky by Train? No, On the Beach. Jesus. On the Beach. If you don't know the song For the Turnstiles by Neil Young, if you like Alex Giannascoli, try that. It's your Skygo rhythm. Check that out. So there it is. There's my review of the album. I really liked it. I really got it by the end. I'm excited to listen to his other stuff. And I really hope he figures his stuff out. These are my Patrons. They help me to buy music. I'm going to buy this album. I mean, I'm going to buy it for my daughter because she likes this music. I'm trying to encourage her to continue listening to good music and to put me on to good music. Extra thanks over here to Paolo. I forgot his name last time, and he's been a Patreon for a while. Got a new one down here on the LP tier with Mary. You see, I didn't realize I have her name up there. And then I stopped because some other currency. So I thought I didn't know how much money it was. Then I looked it up. It's like, oh, LP. So there you go. So thank you to my Patreons. And I don't know, answer one of the 50 questions I put in the comments. Until next time, God save the Tobies. There's the camera.